UK Wine Show, show number 858. The UK wine trade, 2006 to 2026, with James Ellis of Ellis Wines on what has changed and what's not. Hi, my name's Chris Scott.
And I'm Jane Scott.
And together we founded 3050 and the UK Wine Show. The UK Wine Show is now 20 years old. We started back in 2006, and this show is the first show that we put out that pops us over the 20-year mark. As a celebration of that, we're going to be talking to James Ellis. James was one of the first people we interviewed when we first started the podcast. And when I spoke to James back in 2006, we asked him a load of different questions. I've gone back to him and asked him a lot of the very same questions. And his answers are different. And wait until you hear what happened to him during COVID. I hope your week's been very good. I've had a pretty steady week. It is Welsh Wine Week. I haven't really done anything too exciting for Welsh Wine Week, but I have been busy doing various bits and pieces. What about yourself, Jane?
We're mainly getting ready for the Level 3 course that's about to start on Monday.
And the exams. We ran a load of Level 3 exams.
Yeah, we had the exams from the last cohort. They came in on Saturday and Monday, and it was lovely to meet the students, wasn't it?
Yep.
You'd already met them a couple of times because you ran the course jointly with Tom on this occasion.
Yeah, well, he was the lead. I just covered the first day and the last day for him.
We've also got a Level 2 underway. So with the Level 2 and the Level 3, these are going to be the last courses before we finish for the summer. How quickly this year has flown, Chris.
Well, that's because we were in New Zealand for about a third of it.
Too true. We were away for 3 months, weren't we? It does make a difference.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, Jane, a big thank you to our patrons who've been supporting us for the last, we've been doing Patreon now for about 5 years, and they've really helped keep the show going. But Jane, let's get this week's Patreon flashcard question.
So the question is, what region of Italy makes most of the country's traditional method sparkling wines?
You got an idea?
I think so.
Yeah.
I'm hoping so.
It's a Level 4 question, so if you did Level 3, you may not know the answer to that, but we'll see how you get on, Jane.
Alarm bells are ringing, Chris.
Well, let's talk about the answer to that at the end of the show, but let's get straight into the news.
Well, first up this week, Exchange for Change has confirmed the handling fees that retailers and other return point operators will receive under the Deposit Return Scheme, or the DRS, across England, Scotland and Northern Ireland, providing greater certainty ahead of the scheme's launch in October 27. As the UK's official deposit management organisation, Exchange for Change will oversee the not-for-profit scheme when it begins. And following industry consultation, manual return points will receive a handling fee of 3p per container. Automatic return points will be paid 5p per container for up to 225,000 eligible items each year, falling to 1.3p per container above that threshold. The Federation of Independent Retailers welcomed the announcement, saying the rates were broadly in line with expectations, although it would have preferred higher fees. The organisation also highlighted concerns about costs linked to labour, maintenance, equipment and lost retail space. The DRS will carry a 20p deposit for bottles and cans, paid out upon return of the container to a return point.
The handling fees paid to return point operators are funded through the Deposit Return Scheme's self-funding financial model rather than, say, a taxation. The main sources are producer fees paid by the drinks manufacturers and importers to run the scheme. So if you're a drinks manufacturer, you need to pay them some money for the scheme. And also the revenue from unredeemed deposits when consumers do not return the containers. And also income from selling the collected materials such as recycled aluminium and plastic. What's the next story, Jane?
Well, new research is suggesting that adding more disease-resistant genes to grapevines does not always improve protection against downy mildew, challenging a key assumption behind modern grape breeding programs across Europe. Researchers have found that stacking multiple resistance genes in a single vine may not necessarily give additional protection against downy mildew, one of the most damaging diseases in the vineyard. The findings, reported by VVQ, that's Vigna, Vini and Qualità, challenge the practice of gene pyramiding, where breeders combine several resistance traits to make it harder for pathogens to overcome plant defences. Scientists discovered that some gene combinations work well together, while others add little extra protection. As a result, breeders may need to place greater emphasis on how resistance genes interact rather than simply increasing their number. The study could influence future breeding programs across Europe, as Europe seeks to reduce pesticide use while maintaining vineyard productivity and wine quality.
The work on these new crossings is going on at a rapid pace, but gene stacking was one of the ways to improve resistance. I have a couple of great podcasts I did in New Zealand, which we haven't released yet, looking at things like gene stacking and how the genes are inherited, etc. And it's really, really interesting how it works. But definitely, gene stacking was considered a key process to continue that evolution. It looks like now it needs a bit more pre-thought to get the hoped for results. What's the last story, Jane?
Finally this week, French vineyard prices have fallen for a second consecutive year, with Bordeaux suffering the steepest declines as the country's wine industry grapples with vine removals, falling demand and a sluggish land market. New figures from SAFER, France's agricultural land agency, shows that the average price of vineyard land with a protected designation fell by 2.9% in 2025 to €171,400 per hectare. Picture looks worse if we take out Champagne from the equation, seeing prices dropping by 6.8% to €87,400 per hectare. Bordeaux Aquitaine saw the sharpest decline, with vineyard values falling 23.8% after an 18.4% drop the previous year. The average price reached €77,100 per hectare, while some prestigious appellations recorded even larger falls. Pauillac dropped 32% to around €1.7 million per hectare, and Margaux fell 43% to €800,000 per hectare. The picture was brighter in Burgundy and Champagne, where prices continued to rise modestly, with Burgundy vineyard values increasing 3.9% and Champagne edging up by 0.9%. Despite weaker prices, vineyard transactions rose by 16.3% in value to €1.65 billion. However, industry leaders warn the French vineyard market remains in a period of major restructuring, with nearly 30,000 hectares already uprooted and further removals expected as producers adapt to changing consumer habits and declining global wine consumption.
Loire is also a region where prices held up well. In fact, if you look at it, you've got Burgundy, Champagne and Loire, all with modest price rises. And these are all in the cooler north, where yields are naturally a little bit lower. I can see why Champagne and Burgundy prices have held up. The supply of land is very restricted. I have a summary of all the different regions and their prices, which we will put in the full news article. I don't think we'll read it out. And the patrons will get a copy of it, obviously. Okay, Jane, well, next up we normally have Friday Lambrusco, but I thought I'd take just a moment to ask you what has been your favourite thing about producing the show over the last 20 years?
I think it must be the time when I said to you, can I have a bit more involvement? Because I used to read the news and I read that just the 3 news articles and I was too shy to say something more than that. And then I think it was about 5 years ago and I said perhaps we should have a little bit more banter. And I think I've grown in confidence from that. So I think I've enjoyed that, just being more part of the show with you. And then the other thing has been coming along with you to interview some of the winemakers and producers and things, especially in New Zealand. But we've been doing that in England for a bit as well.
Yep.
And so, Chris, what's your favourite thing from the last 20 years?
Actually, I hadn't really thought about it. I only thought about asking you the question. I think there's probably a couple of things. I enjoy talking to people because the reason I started the show, or we started the show, is because I'd done my diploma and I'd stopped learning. And you know what I'm like. I like to learn. So for me, it's not about one particular thing. It's the fact that my own education has progressed as we've been doing the show for 20 years, and it's been a vehicle for me to continue learning, which is really super important to my happiness and well-being, is just to feel that I'm learning something. And I think the show's given me that opportunity, and I know from some of the feedback that a lot of the listeners like that as well.
And I am nodding here profusely as Chris has said that, because I do know you love learning, always wanting to take on new information. But yes, the feedback is the other thing, because when we're out and about at trade tastings or networking events, people do often come up to us. Chris is very recognisable, not me so much, but people do come up to us and say, UK Wine Show, we listen. And that's been really nice, hasn't it, to know that there's people out there actually listening to us.
Yes, Jane said it very nicely. I'm very recognisable. She did used to say I've got a face for radio. Right, let's get straight into Friday Lambrusco, though. And this week's is our last Lambrusco. So we've tried about 10 over the last couple of months. And the last wine I've saved to last is one of the better Lambruscos. It's the Poltroneri Radici. It's 100% Lambrusco Sorbara and made to the ancestral method, or pet nat. Because it's pet nat, these wines tend to be bone dry. It's got an alcohol level of about 11% as well, and slightly cloudy because they haven't done any disgorgement of the dead yeast. Now, I said it rates very well. Decanter only gave it a 90 out of 100, but Kieran O'Keefe, who is an Italian specialist, gave it 94 out of 100. And the website Wine Enthusiasts typically give Radice a 94 to 96 score. So it's considered one of the top expressions of Lambrusco. Because it's an organic wine and Poltroneri tend to be low intervention, it doesn't have a cork, it's got a beer cap.
Cheers, Chris. And it's a salmon pink in colour, isn't it, Chris? We've had more, I would say, pink than we have deep red. I'd think at least 6 of them have been palish pink.
Yeah, in fact, it's even less pale than pale pink. I mean, it's a clear bottle and it clearly looks sort of an orangey rosé colour, but in the glass, it's more golden. On the nose, it's got clear autolyc flavours, hasn't it?
Actually, I skipped the nose and I went straight into drinking it. Oops. Confected on the nose, do you think? A little bit?
A little bit, but not bad. I mean, I quite like it. It's there is some red fruit there, maybe some strawberries, raspberries, etc. But it's got lots and lots of that autolyc character as well.
Frizzanti, would you say?
It's definitely frizzanti.
Actually quite pleasant, isn't it?
Yeah. They describe it, because it's an ancestral method, as being just a tad rustic, but I don't think it is.
I don't find it rustic.
I think it's nice.
I think that's highly drinkable.
Yeah, it's quite fresh, very fresh. But yeah, very enjoyable.
Well, let's just say cheers then to Lambrusco Friday, Chris.
And 20 years
And 20 years of the podcast.
And I will finish this glass later on. I think last week I was going for a run, wasn't I? And I couldn't do it. But today I've already done my run first.
And we're the afternoon, Chris. It's 2:30, so...
we can do it. Okay, Jane, let's get a reminder of this week's Patreon flashcard question.
The question is, what region of Italy makes most of the country's traditional method sparkling wine?
I will give you an answer to that at the end of the show. But next up, we're going to be talking to James Ellis. As I said at the top of the show, we interviewed him 20 years ago, and we're back talking to him. James is director of Ellis Wines, a family-owned wine importer and distributor based in southwest London. And the business has been supplying restaurants, pubs and bars across the UK since the 1980s, and today operates on a national scale. And as I said, he was one of the first guests we had. So I went back and asked him a lot of the same questions I asked him last time. And I even tested him on some of his predictions. So let's have a listen to what James has to say. Hi, my name's Chris Scott and I'm here with James Ellis from Ellis Wines. How are you, James?
I'm great, thank you, Chris. Good to see you again.
Excellent. Yeah, again, that's right, because we interviewed you 20 years ago. You were, I think, the 6th or 7th person that we interviewed for the UK Wine Show when we launched back in June 2006.
Yeah, time flies, eh?
It does and does. So what we thought we'd do is part of a series we're doing looking at what's happened in the last 20 years. We're going back through some of the people we interviewed 20 years ago, and I want to go through a set of questions and see if the answers have changed in 20 years.
I am convinced they will have changed enormously.
Yeah.
If I had to have a guess, yeah.
I imagine so. So, do you want to just give us an overview? Because I doubt if many listeners remember the interview from 20 years ago. We've done over 850 since then.
Well done. Family business based in southwest London. Started in 1980, but with a very long family history, having been in retail Second World War up to the 70s, and changed direction completely, focused on hospitality, on trade, working with lots of local restaurants is how we started. We were a team of about 10 people at the beginning. It's a totally family-owned business. Today run by myself, James, and my two siblings, Robert and William. And we've got next generation all involved in the company as well.
You're effectively a wine agency.
We are a wine agency, importer and distributor.
Originally, the business was Ellis of Richmond, which was a retail outlet in Richmond.
That's correct. And we had, in the end, we had about 60 shops across the southeast of England.
60? Oh, I didn't quite realise it was that big.
Yeah, no, it was quite good. But once the supermarkets came into the drinks business, up until the 70s, they didn't have a licence. This is pre my time. So this is my grandfather, father, great-grandfather had done this. We were really going to struggle, as did many of the independent wine businesses that were on the high street of the time. None of them exist today. So we changed direction, started a brand new company.
Okay, so it was absolutely brand new, nothing from the old one, or?
There was. So when we started again, we had, in the locality around Richmond, we had about 25 local accounts, the local golf club, the local bowling club. In those days, Richmond Ice Rink, I remember when I first started. So there were probably 20 local businesses that we worked with. But on-trade distribution in those days was very, very different. It was dominated by the brewers. And so we were one of the startups. There were about 2 or 3 other companies started around the same sort of time. They all exist today, and they're all big competitors of ours and much, much bigger businesses, but none of them are any longer a private family business.
All right, well, let's go through some of the questions. But before we do that, what do you think the biggest change between 20 years ago, 2006, and 2026 has been?
That's a good question. I think the range of wine that we have access to would be one of the biggest changes. And I think there are 3 things I always say to people. I think inexpensive travel allowed people to go on holiday. Nothing to do with me, but it allowed people to travel in Europe was one. Second thing is the growth of the supermarket business, focusing on food. And guess what? Once they realised people were going on holiday to Spain, part of their offering became Spanish food. Therefore, it became also the addition of Spanish wine. So I think the whole growth of food in the UK and how we treat food from 25 years ago and where we are today has had a big impact on the sort of wine that the consumer is drinking. You are completely spoilt for choice in the UK market on wine selection.
Back in 2006, did you have many agencies? Because I didn't think you had agencies. A lot of it was you're buying in and then redistributing from wholesalers.
Yeah, that was a change. I would guess we started at the end of last century, around 1999, when we moved to here. Had much more space, big warehouse. We started to focus on definitely taking on more agency distribution and having a bit more control ourselves in our selection, what we were offering to the restaurants. And because we have focused in the on-trade, we've wanted agencies that are not on the high street. Yep. So we don't want to see a product that is $10.99 in the supermarket being offered on our in the restaurants. So restaurants and pubs and bars. And I think that has been a really important part of our business. So when you then start to look at where your sourcing comes from, it probably means that because we're not one of the biggest companies, we're also sourcing from family-owned wineries. So taking them on as agency, unique distributor to the UK market.
Last time we spoke, you guys were focused on supplying restaurants in the southwest London area. How would you describe the business today?
Oh, it's grown hugely. Yeah, we actually have a warehouse distribution place down in Exeter, so we look after all of the southwest edges of Wales all the way up into the Cotswolds. From down there, we've kept our big warehouse here in Middlesex, and we distribute all the way up to the north of England, customers in Scotland, customers in the islands. So very much a different business, much, much bigger than it was in those days.
You're now trading as Ellis Wines rather than Ellis of Richmond. What was the reason for that rebranding?
Yeah, we wanted people to realise, I think there were two things. As you go further away, somebody in Wales says, well, actually, Richmond, that's an awful long way. How are they going to manage with our distribution? How are they going to look after us? Have they got people on the ground? So we felt we were a little bit localised using the name Richmond, although that's the heritage of the company. We wanted to have a brand that we could take a bit further.
Okay. The last time you told us, when you started out, 95% of the wines that you were selling, when you first started out, were French. What's it now? That would have been in the 80s, I imagine, not the 2000s.
Yeah, what's changed? I think France, by a long shot, is still our biggest source of wines. We're 50 to 55% of all our sales come from France.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Still, which is, I think, partly driven by the type of customer we work with. France still holds a very strong place. We have seen a decline in all our New World sales over the last 10 years.
Oh.
The big winners have been Spain and Italy particularly on the boom of Prosecco, which is absolutely everywhere today, didn't really feature in our portfolio 20 years ago, and that's become a very, very key line for anybody inside hospitality, anybody drinking good value fizz.
Okay, that's strange because the next question I was going to ask you is that Australia had a dominant position in the UK market, and at the 20 years ago you're saying, oh, I don't think that's going to continue. So were you talking mainly about the wine in general with the supermarkets, or were you talking about your business at the time?
I was talking probably about our business, because I know Australia's still kept a strong position in retail. For us now, Australia is really a very insignificant unkind, but it's really a very small amount of what we do. I think New Zealand has become the big player in the Southern Hemisphere. We've seen Chile.
And that's in the restaurant market.
This is in the restaurant market.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Need to be very clear that the restaurant market still really only represents 10 to 15% of all UK wine sales. And I think the thing that we shouldn't misunderstand or ignore is that when the smoking ban came in 2008, I think it was, many of the pubs that until then had really been boozers, these businesses, to survive, changed to offering food.
Yep.
And so, in fact, the boom over the last 20 years, for me, has been hugely in the change of pubs becoming food pubs. I don't use the word gastropub, but I think this food pub business has been the real big change in the last 20 years or so. It didn't really exist prior to that.
Is that because they were all tied to the pub chains?
I think they were tied to the pub chains, and the trend during the 80s and into the 90s was the wine bar, and that was really the place where we were selling a lot of wine in the first sort of 20 years of our company's history. And that disappeared really, I think, and became much more towards the food pubs. And people are drinking wine in pubs, sitting down, having a meal. It fits very well. Yes, people want to go and have a beer, but I think wine has taken a really key place in the food pubs.
And have you guys moved more into the pubs? Because you said when you first started, or even 20 years ago, there was no real...
Yeah, there was a bit. We've always done something in the pubs. I think that's been a big growth in the last 20, 25 years.
You were excited about Italy back in 2006. It sounds like that's come to fruition as well.
Yeah, no, we're very pleased with Italy, and I think it's moved from Prosecco and Pinot Grigio to, interesting varietals, wines that people have never heard, Sicily, southern Italy, some of the regions. We do quite a lot of wine from Piedmont in northern Italy. So yes, exciting. I think there's good value. The wines are good. We're selling a lot of things like Gavi de Gavi, for example, and I think that probably is having a bit of an impact on sales of things like Chablis and Sancerre, which are getting increasingly expensive. So Albarino is a big winner of that at the moment as well.
Well, what do you think the wines were that you would have mentioned, the grape varieties, back then?
Yeah, it would have been Merlot for sure, probably Shiraz, Chardonnay definitely. What else would
2006 for Chardonnay?
Yeah, I think so. You
got them wrong. You got them all wrong. So you mentioned aromatics were the big emerging trend with Sauvignon Blanc.
Yeah, definitely.
Pinot Gris. And you said that Riesling was slowly recovering. Has it ever recovered?
Yeah, we're doing well with Riesling. I think the change in the tax laws in the last 5 years has been a big benefit to Riesling.
Yeah.
And there's more interest from the young. So I think there's a demographic change that's taken place in 20 years. Historically, we felt that a lot of our wine was being drunk by the 50 to 65-year-old market 20-something years ago. And that's still the case today. It's a key part of wine consumption. And a lot of people talk about the fact that the young haven't got money, they're not drinking, it's all about health and wellness. That is correct. But when they do have a drink, they're much more exploratory. So I think a lot of these wines that we are selling today are actually being consumed by the young, more so than what I would call the older traditional market, who stick to their Rioja, who stick to their Bordeaux Red, who stick to Chablis. Whereas I think when we're looking at selling some of the wines that are more interesting, we're selling quite a bit of Greek wine, for example. That is, I am sure, we don't have data, but I am sure that is being drunk by much younger people who are interested in exploring what wine has to offer.
One of the things you said about how to evaluate the quality of a restaurant was to look at the wines by the glass. In 2006, we were starting to see a much more of a rollout of wines by the glass. How has wines by the glass changed? Because I'll quote you, you were saying, we now see a lot of restaurants doing a minimum of 6 reds and 6 whites, maybe even 10, and certainly a couple of rosés at the moment. That was in 2006. What do you think wine by the glass is like but now compared to back then?
I think it's probably no bigger.
Yeah.
I don't think it's grown in the number of offerings, unless you really go to very high-end or specialist wine locations.
Yep.
But I would say in general, that would be the max, say 10 and 10. The one part that has grown hugely is rosé. So we're seeing probably 8 and 8 red and white, but possibly 4 or 5 rosé now.
Okay. And what about sparkling? Because
Definitely.
there wasn't really tools around in 2006 to preserve wine. Like you didn't have Coravan solutions, etc.
Yeah, definitely. And I think 2 bits there. I think the UK has a love-hate relationship with champagne. When we're feeling that we're in a bit of a good place, where we spend a bit more money on champagne, we're inconsistent. And I think the arrival of Prosecco made sparkling wine an everyday accessible product. So people got used to drinking sparkling wine. And then, in more recent times, we've had the emergence of English, really good quality English sparkling. And we're definitely seeing that more and more of our customers absolutely insist on having something English on their wine list. And we're beginning to get more and more requests about having still wine from England on the wine list. The real emerging part is the bit in between. And that is the bit between Prosecco and English sparkling or champagne, which is the arrival of Cremant across France, really good quality Cava, and premium Italian wine that isn't Prosecco.
Yeah.
And we're seeing a big uplift on that. But again, people don't know it, so the restaurants need to be bold enough to serve it, but it fits a very good value price point.
All right, this will be an interesting one because we've had a lot of inflation. The reference point we talked about in terms of pricing for wines in restaurants was Chablis. And at the time, Chablis was about a 10 quid bottle of wine. And in the restaurants, you were talking about it being around 25 quid a bottle. What's it like now?
I think, oh dear. So Chablis as a reference point today, 15 to 20 quid to the restaurants. Horrible, 55 to 80 pounds in the restaurants. So Chablis become incredibly expensive. A combination of two parts, difficult harvests. Had a lot of hail, a lot of frost. So the yields have been really impacted. But also, as you say, inflation, duty increases, restaurants, their need for margins has made it increasingly difficult. So in saying all of that, Chablis sales have remained strong. It's a very UK iconic product in the restaurant market, and it's not too far away. Neighbour Sancerre has enjoyed something very similar.
Yeah.
So we're seeing they're not huge numbers if you were to look at the growth of our business, but it's still a really important part. The success on red has come from Pinot Noir.
What, from
France, but also from New Zealand, bit from Argentina. We've been doing some southern Argentinian Pinot Noirs from Patagonia. They've been good.
Yeah.
Certainly regional France away from Burgundy. That's been a big uplift. We're doing some good volumes of Pinot Noir from the Loire Valley, where the value is excellent value for money.
Strange enough, you did mention Pinot Noir as being your recommended value wine, and you said it was New Zealand Pinot Noir.
Doing still incredibly well with New Zealand Pinot Noir. Big success.
Yeah.
They give you a very easy drinking style of wine. We've been working with 3 families in New Zealand. In that whole 20, same people still working with them today, 20 years later, and still selling a lot of good New Zealand Pinot, yeah.
I think people often say Chile is the place to get the real bargain Pinots, but New Zealand Pinot is very good quality, bang for buck.
Yeah, definitely. I would say we don't find Chilean Pinot sells that well in our side of the business. I think probably does very well in retail, but certainly from our side we're finding it sort of, you've got 3 sort of levels. I think we've got French regional, that could be Loire or Languedoc for example, then we've got New Zealand, and then we've got Burgundy.
Okay, what about Oregon? Does that not?
Yeah, we do a bit, but we bring in a premium one, so we're not sort of conflicting with our New Zealand sales. So we do. I think Oregon's making some great wines.
And the final one was you gave us a tip to finish. I'll tell you what the tip was.
I wonder if I got that right.
Well, it's a tip. You're right. It's a tip. I'll tell you what the tip was, and you tell me what your new tip is.
Okay.
No pressure. I just dropped that on you from a high. All right. The tip was basically when you're in the supermarket and you're trying to find a wine that you like, and then look left or right, and maybe up or down a little bit, and then try and find something that was a little bit different. And the idea being, if you don't know the brand, because you know the one that you like, but you don't know the brand, you're probably going to get a slightly better value out of it if it's less well known, because we always pay premium for, you're talking about Chablis or Sancerre or Burgundy. There's always a premium for these brands.
Yeah, I think I'd still stick by that, actually. It's still a good tip. I think the other thing that we should take into account, and is not necessarily the easiest thing to do. I am not a fan of messing around with wine. So if you find wine in the supermarket at 8 or 9 degrees, chances are it's been fiddled with, because that isn't naturally what it would make. That isn't a total
8 or 9 degrees alcohol.
Yes, 8 or 9 degrees alcohol. But what I would say is I think there's been a lot of effort from producers to keep their alcohol levels down. So I think the next thing we're seeing around wellness and health and alcohol consumption and all this.
And duty pricing.
Which of course has gone up a lot. I think that the next tip is we're going to see more focus from people about the level of alcohol on the wine they buy. We hear it when we're putting together wine lists. We hear it when we're talking to consumers. doing events inside our customers. People are interested in, do I really want to drink a 14.5 big blockbuster type of wine? Now, this is a bit of a difficult situation because global warming is making alcohol levels higher. So actually, because there's more sugar, because it's riper, we're getting more alcohol. So where it's the northern hemisphere wines, either top at the northern or the bottom on the southern, that actually I think have the longevity there, because they can generally try and keep the alcohol levels a bit more in check. So I think that has been a difficulty for Argentina, a bit for Chile. Certainly, I think Spain has trying to find ways to bring red wine alcohol perhaps down. 14.5, 14.7, that's quite a chunky red wine.
So, without de-alcoholizing it.
Without messing around with it. How do you do it? Well, that's the trick of viticulture, winemaking, all these type of things, maybe earlier picking. But I suspect, I'm not a viticulturalist, but when I speak to people, they say they're beginning to learn, and they will need to learn more about how they look after their plant or the vine in the vineyards, so that they can actually control the level of alcohol in the end wine.
Have you ever heard of a guy called John Forrest from Marlborough, New Zealand?
I have indeed.
Doctor's Riesling. I interviewed him when I was out in Marlborough recently, and he gets some of his Rieslings where he wants it to come in at 10%, and it's fairly dry. It's not like it's a sweet they've picked early. And he does it all in the vineyard.
Yeah, I think that is people who are conscious about what they're doing. I think that is perhaps a movement that we're going to see, and I think I would link that to regenerative viticulture and sustainability. These are things that we're seeing really at the top of the agenda today. We recently achieved our B Corp accreditation. I think that's something that the youth inside our business were very keen to drive, and it really makes you focus on all the things that you thought were just what you did normally, but actually finding the best possible way in which you can do it. And that's going all the way back to our producers, talking to them, learning about, water saving, all sorts of things, human relationship, looking after their staff properly. That has become a really big, important thing, probably in the last 10 years.
Okay, last question. We've gone back 20 years. Let's go forward 20 years. Now, obviously, things like changing alcohol duties and things like that, no one saw that coming. But is there any sort of projection that you would see coming forward? Anything you'd like to stick out there as your forecast for 20 years?
I'd like, and this will be a bit contentious, I would like to see our relationship with Europe get closer again. I think as a wine importer, bringing a lot of wine in from our friends across the channel, I think that the decisions made in 2016 were not in favour of companies like ours, because the relationship created a huge amount of bureaucracy, and I would like to see some of that red tape that sits between us and our European friends. I'd like to see that removed.
Didn't that help your business though? Because a lot of small independents used to go to Europe and just bring back a couple of pallets, and they can't really do it because the admin is too high now. By increasing the friction, easy transfers of low volumes becomes
very expensive. I agree with that. I mean, the bit we haven't talked about is that we have one arm of our business. Something we learnt a lot during COVID is that we were 95% of everything we sold went into hospitality, and guess what? It got closed.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden it's like, whoa, what do we do? And look, there are lots of stories about how people pivoted and did all sorts of things. But one of the things that we were in a very lucky position, Chris, probably I've never talked to you about this, but we were one of the original importers of Whispering Angel Provence Rosé, which that wonderful summer when everyone was in lockdown, people couldn't get enough wine. And I don't mean couldn't get enough wine. I meant wine suddenly was a bit short. Everyone was sitting at home. All the pubs and restaurants were closed. And we were in a very fortunate position that we had been importing and had a very close relationship with Whispering Angel when it was privately owned. And so we were able to import and sell a huge amount of Whispering Angel during that 4 months. And that helped us develop a market for our agency products on the back, but in partnership really with, into the independent small owner-operator retail market that we've continued to develop. And this has been really an important part of our business. And maybe what you're inferring there is some of these people were bringing wine in directly themselves, whereas actually it's much better to work with a bigger importer and come on the back of us, and maybe they want to buy 20 cases of Whispering Angel, but we can also give them 5 cases of this, 10 cases of that, 5 cases of that from all over the world, and actually make that much more commercially viable for them.
Okay. All right, we'll wrap it up there, James. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Chris. Good to catch up after 20 years.
I've seen you since then, mate. Okay, that ends our interview with James and almost the show. It's been fabulous being 20 years of podcasting. But let's get the answer to this week's Patreon flashcard question. And the question was, Jane, what region of Italy makes most of the country's traditional method sparkling wine? And what do you think it is, Jane?
Well, I think we've been there, and I think it's Franciacorta.
You would be absolutely right.
Yes! Yay!
Yeah. So Franciacorta is up in the north of Italy. It's in Lombardy. So it's sort of west of Verona. So if you go along, you've got Val Suave, Valpolicella, along that mountain range, and then you've got the lake. Well, they're down from the lake from there, and they have been making some pretty decent traditional method sparkling wines.
Thanks, Chris, and thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this special 20th anniversary episode. And remember to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And a big thank you to our patrons for supporting the show.
And I'd just like to say, please give us a review. We don't ask for reviews very often, but if you're just sitting there, it's the end of the show, write us a review. And until next week, cheers and good drinking.
The UK Wine Show is a weekly podcast brought to you by 3050, the wine tasting company. The show is produced by Chris Scott and the news is read by Jane Scott. To listen to other shows, visit ukwineshow.co.uk. Thank you for listening.